Welcome to Gathering Manna, quick practical steps to nourish your soul. I'm Carter.
I'm Scott.
And we are entering season 3. Season 3, we're going to do some different things. Our vision is still the same, though. We are trying to give you quick practical steps, and we're going to do that by digging into theology, digging into scripture, and finding answers. Our aim, though, is going to be a little bit different. Usually, we've had a format, a set series of things that we're going through. So season 1, we were looking at the Lord's Prayer and what each part of that meant. Season 2, we took time to walk through the season of Advent. Yep. and look at the different aspects of Advent that we can glean from. But this season, we're going to be talking about relevant issues in our world, relevant topics that need to be talked about. And today, our topic is going to be anxiety. Scott and I, not experts on anxiety, not expert psychologists, so we called in the big guns. Today we're going to have a special guest, Dr. John Delony, who is a doctor of psychology. He's written a book. He's got a podcast. He's got all these great things going for him, and he is going to help us unpack anxiety and talk about how we can faithfully respond to the anxieties in our life.
That's right. So we'll see you on the other side.
All right, welcome to the podcast, Dr. John Delony, author of Redefining Anxiety, and the host of the podcast, the Dr. John Delony Show. Welcome, John. How are you today?
Good, man. Yeah, we if you knew how many hours and professionals it took to come up with the name of that podcast, that radio show, it's embarrassing, man. It's the most unoriginal title ever.
It happened.
But it happened. That's the story of my life, Scott. But it happened.
It's exactly right. So, John, tell us a little bit, I guess, about your background. Obviously, you've published a book recently, Redefining Anxiety. A little bit about your podcast. Just a quick tutorial of you, who John is.
Man, I'm a dad and a husband, and I got a couple of little dogs. That's me in a nutshell. The last almost 2 decades now, I've was a high school teacher, a K-12 teacher, but most of my time has been spent working in higher education and working with students in student conduct issues, in mental health crisis, and then of course by extension, you're always working with their families as well and your colleagues. And then when you and we all ended up in the same city for a season, I was working at a university working with students, but I was also working with the police department after hours doing crisis response and death notifications and working with folks when the worst of the worst in their life had happened, just sitting with people in some really messy moments. And then recently, about a year ago, I just did a total 90-degree left career turn. I'm still trying to figure out what in the world I did, but I was working at a university here in Nashville, Tennessee, and met up with Dave Ramsey and his crew, and they challenged me to go tackle the mental health challenges and relationship challenges of America, and so here we are. So we're figuring out as we go, man. It's a good time.
Fantastic. And man, what a perfect time to join in. But I feel like you glazed over some of your history in the world, and could you tell me a little bit more about your musical career before all this relationship?
I really don't know what you're talking about. Here's what I'll tell you. I'm not very good. So my brother went to college on a cello scholarship. He sat in a room and he did this weird thing called practice. He would just practice all the time. I would stand in front of a mirror and try to figure out the coolest ways I could look in trying to play a certain thing. Wow. So I didn't care about how good it was. I wanted to look really cool while doing it. And clearly he still plays music. I'm a podcast. So
I feel like you just like defined every, 10 to 12-year-old boy, like
Yeah, the
standing in front of
problem
your
was
mirror,
I
just
was like
trying to
22.
look cool.
Oh, okay. This wasn't too long ago.
Yeah, just kick me while I'm down. Thanks, man. No, I was like 19, and I was in front of a mirror trying to look awesome.
Yeah.
Like, I know I could play this lick this way. I could play the solo, but I need to look like this. And clearly that didn't work out. When I met real writers and real musicians, I was like, oh, y'all write songs? That's ridiculous. It doesn't matter what you sound like. What do you look like, man? So, yeah. Now I got a podcast, man. That's how it worked out for me.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh man. All right. So so the book is titled Redefining Anxiety. So talk a little bit about that. What do we get wrong? Man, what do we, whenever we're thinking about anxiety, what are some of the things that are going on in our heads where we're just like, as a society, as people, as culture, like, what do we get wrong about anxiety, and how does it need to be defined?
Man, that's got 50 or 60 different answers to that question, because there's the society part and the family part and the people part. At the end of the day, we have pathologized, we have demonized or made the enemy any sort of discomfort in our society. And so we have made being uncomfortable a disease, and then we've offered all these different solutions to try to solve the problem of discomfort. The challenge with that is discomfort is where you grow, right? When you lift weights, you're actually breaking your body down so it can grow itself back stronger. When you run, you are making yourself uncomfortable so that, right? You eat things that do not taste the best, right? Twinkies and Twizzlers and gummy candies taste incredible, and they'll kill you, right? So life is about uncomfortable discomfort, right? Fractals is the nerd part. And so fast forward to anxiety. Man, anxiety, all it is just an alarm telling you that things in your life are off kilter. Things in your life, your relationships are off center. You're in a situation that you don't have any control over, right? You're in a disadvantaged situation, or you're not safe. That's all anxiety is. It's just letting you know, hey, you're not okay. And we've made anxiety the problem. And the challenge with that is, so the analogy I use is your house is on fire, your yard is on fire, and you've got you and a counselor and some pastor who's not been trained and like a buddy who's an idiot. And you're all on like a ladder trying to figure out how to take the batteries out of the smoke detector because it's so loud, right? Instead of putting the fire out of your house, you're all like, man, it sure is loud. If we could just turn this thing off, we'll all be okay. And so people get anxiety and we medicate it. I've been there for a season. Sometimes that's a good thing, right? But we tell people to take a warm bath and to write poetry and to light a candle and to fight anxiety instead of dealing with, man, your relationships are a mess. You owe too much money. You're in a job that you hate. You're in all these other things are going on. There's systemic, all sorts of systemic issues going on, from poverty to racism, all these other things. We don't want to deal with those issues. We just got to get that alarm off, right? So in that book, it's a really thin, quick book. It's just kind of pull the thread on, man, anxiety is not the problem. Anxiety is telling you that you've got a bunch of challenges in your life.
Yeah. That's good. That's actually really, like, in thinking about anxiety, I know I've actually placed it a lot of times in my life more central to who I was. Well, I'm just an anxious person. I'm a worrywart. And so it's good to like break that out from the center of who you are and just kind of define it for what it is. I think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, taking that time to know yourself outside of your anxiety is so important, and know your relationships. Your relationships that might cause some anxiety, but find your identity not in your anxiety. I think you hit on that in the book, but finding it in your relationships and in
and there's a gentleness with instead of identifying yourself, hey, I'm just an anxious person, just being curious about, man, why are my alarms always going off, right? Am I in a situation where I'm in an abusive situation? Do I have to make some major changes because I'm not disciplined right? Or am I a jerk to my wife? Fill in the blank. Or are people a jerk to me and I've got to deal with that? I'm not going to be able to go to this school. I need to move because of like whatever those things are. Instead of just owning that identity, man, just ask yourself, hey, what's that alarm trying to tell me? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good.
So here's another question for you. What effect does faith have on this better definition of anxiety? What effect does faith have?
Ooh,
on
man, that's
anxiety.
loaded, dude.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know, right? Yeah.
I thought this was a softball podcast, man. Y'all getting all deep. Man, I think faith is is an existential challenge and it's a practical challenge at the same time. And so, um, man, if you are not grounded or you are not in control or you think have a fractured relationship, your alarms go off. And so if your faith is built in a God that's angry at you all the time, or is just waiting to catch you doing something so he can send you to hell, man, think of the existential trauma. Dude, I was just thinking of this the other day. We're in the middle of writing a big book, and I was driving home, and I was thinking about my understanding of faith as a kid. Get this, get this impact on a 10-year-old, right? And feel free to edit this out if this is too much for your show. But I was driving home, and I was like, as a 10-year-old, you know what was in my head? It was that God so loved his son, but you, Delony, you said bad words at the playground. So I had to murder my child because of you. And yeah, I had to murder him. And if you do it again, I'm going to have to destroy you for all of eternity. And to think about the existential trauma that would put on a 10-year-old, I tell parents all the time, stop making your 10-year-old like keep you guys happy. Well, man, the way we wrap faith sometimes around with young people, especially, and then you get, as older you get, it doesn't go away. So all I have to say is, man, there's a lot of existential faith trauma there with that relationship part. And then there's the connection part to a faith community. If I feel like I'm having to earn my way into this community, if I feel like they're not going to love me because of the way I look, the way I dress, the way I smell, how much money I do or don't have, man, I'm never going to fully be able to be comfortable in this place. Yeah. And my alarms are going to go off every time I show up. Every time I'm around this community, I'm not going to feel settled. And when you're settled, then you can get into the real part of being connected, which is the thing that heals us, right? Yeah. And so, man, I think faith and anxiety are interconnected mainly because we don't do a good job of letting people live faith. We put a bunch of parameters on that relationship, to which point, man, then that sets off every alarm we have.
Yeah, that's good. That's an excellent answer. That reminds me of like when I was a kid, one of the struggles I had, one of those anxiety moments was speaking of cursing, like if I was in a car and I was driving down the road and if I had stepped in that car, spoken a bad word or something, and then the car was about to get into a car wreck and I was about to die, and if I didn't say, God, please forgive me, before I died, then going to hell. And that scared the living daylights out of me. And it gave me a lot of anxiety to the point where I thought I had to like build up this, really a facade of how good I was. And it was all works righteousness versus actually the truth of the gospel, which is grace, mercy, redemption, and all those elements. And so
it's like, come grab something to eat and sit at the table, man. It's the exact opposite.
Yeah.
And what's so crazy, I don't know if you guys experience this, but now that I'm older and I've spent time having friends in other faith communities and actually going back and not so one of the big challenges in the influencer space is you get really busy, and instead of me talking to actual, people who are struggling, you start spending your days talking to people who talk to people who are struggling, right? So in the same thing with your faith journey, instead of actually reading it for yourself, you read a book by somebody who read it, and you listen to somebody else who's listened to somebody else, or you talk to somebody who talks to people, right? So I don't know if y'all experience this, man, but it's been a season the last 5 or 6 years where I think, are we reading the same book? Like, what are you talking about, right? Yeah. So it's and then it's me having to be graceful on the return too, right? Always remembering that I'm humble and trying to figure this out as I go as well.
Right. That's good. So talking a little bit more about the faith element of this in Scripture. So I went to Matthew chapter 6, where Jesus starts talking about worrying. And he talks about, do not worry. If you know that section, the Sermon on the Mount, great section. So I started looking up that word because I'm, I guess, a nerd, and started going to the Greek and everything, and it means anxious, distracted, or to care for. And I was like, I think that's really interesting. And so I started really looking at this idea that there are negative types of anxiety based on that word, where like properly, I wrote it down. This type of anxiety, this negative anxiety, can really be translated divided into parts, or to go into pieces, or to be pulled apart. And then there's this positive type of anxiety as well, that it's defined directly like effectively distributing concern in proper relation to the whole picture. So you have these like two different types of definitions from the same word. You go to one section of scripture and this word is used, and it's used in a negative context. You go to another set of scripture, Philippians 2:20, 1 Corinthians 12:25, and that same word is used, but it's used as a like concern.
Like his concern for you is leading him to do good things or care deeply about your community.
Yeah. So based on that, maybe help us process that a little bit. Is there such a thing as then like positive anxiety and negative anxiety? What is the difference? Just kind of process that for us.
So there's a big difference between stress and anxiety, and there's good stress and bad stress, right? And good stress is, hey, you got a test tomorrow, you should study, right? Or you got a paper due in 2 months. It leads you to better things. It's the stress you put on your body when exercising. It's the stress you feel when you and your wife are out of sync and you need to sit down and have a hard conversation, right? Those are all good things. Chronic stress over time destroys the body from the inside out. There's a physiological consequence to that, right? Whether you're lonely, whether you are constantly on call 24/7, 365, you've heard of burnout. Pastors experience this a lot. But stress can be negative too, too much of it, right? Working out every single day for a year without taking a break, your body's going to break down. It's going to quit on you, right? And so I think we're in a season right now where we call every feeling we have is depression or anxiety. Depression or anxiety. If I'm stressed, I got anxiety. If I'm sad, I'm depressed. I can't tell you how many college students over the years came in my office and said, hey man, my dad just moved out. My mom or my granddad, my 90-year-old granddad passed away. I've got depression. I'd say, no, you don't, man. You're sad. And you're supposed to be sad, right? Or I've got 4 tests next week. I've got anxiety so bad. I was like, man, no, you don't. You are really stressed because this is a hard season. And hey, you're about to be a lawyer. I want this to be really hard because one day I'm going to die and my wife is going to come with our will and she's going to be weeping and she's going to call you. And I want you to be really good at this. And so I hope law school is hard. I hope nursing school is hard, right? And so that stress is good. We just pathologize that discomfort. I think another important thing when we get to worry, you've heard of ruminating, right? When you just get those looping thoughts over and over. Man, there is I don't want to use spiritual language here, but there's a heaviness to that rumination because we think we are thinking about important things and we're not. We're having conversations in our head that we think we're going to have. We're never going to have these. Like, I'm just going to tell my father-in-law that. You're never going to tell him that. Or I'm just going to tell my boss. You're not ever going to say those words ever, right? Or you're just thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking, but it's about work or it's about your faith or it's about your marriage. It's not getting you anywhere. And this central passage in the Sermon on the Mount always pulls me back to this obsession, this pathology with control. And it's pretty clear, man, you control nothing, nothing. At the very least, you control your attitude, right? Yeah. But it's going to rain on wealthy people and poor people and good people and bad people. And you don't even get to decide what color your hair is or if it's going to be curly or straight. Get over it, move on with your life. It's that sense of you own so little. And if we had another hour on this podcast, we could talk about the last 200 years. We've just become obsessed with the bell curve. How can we norm things and predict things? Our stock markets love predictions. Our insurance company love predictions. There's an extraordinary author, Nassim Taleb, he wrote The Black Swan. He wrote Anti-Fragile. The only things that matter in our lives are things that happen outside those bell curves, right? When you walk into a room and you see her and everything's different, or that time there's an earthquake, or that time, I don't know, like when the state of Texas froze to death, right? And it just shut down, right?
Yeah.
Now things are going to be different. There's going to be a before and after this moment, or 9/11, or whatever those things are. And so we get so obsessed with control and prediction. And that scripture to me is saying that is a waste of your life. You're not going to add a second to your life by thinking you can predict or ruminating or worrying. Dude, just ask for what you need and then go about your day and love people, man.
But that doesn't mean don't buy insurance.
No, for sure, get insurance, man. Yeah, for
That's
sure.
Dave Ramsey 101, I think,
That's
right?
There you go.
Insurance guys, Xander
it
Insurance.
Put the plug out.
Well, so there's this idea again, anxiety, and then again, I'm going back to scripture here, but then you have this other word that seems on the opposite side. Instead of being pulled apart as worry and everything would dictate, there's this other word that's more about being pulled together and wholesomeness, and it's that word peace. And so Jesus, he dies, he gets resurrected, he visits his disciples. They're freaking out because they just know, oh man, I just left this dude. I just ditched this guy. I betrayed him basically with my actions. And the first word he says to him is peace. And we did a whole episode on this about peace. And so we're not going to get too much into that, but just that feeling of the pieces in your life really just being picked back up, being put back together by the hands of the Lord. And so you have anxiety, you have peace. So speak about peace a little bit. What is that to you? And I guess just go into what where you found peace maybe in your life.
Man, peace is the opposite. I mean, peace is swimming upstream culturally. I think there is no more countercultural movement than towards a good night's sleep, towards laughter, towards being able to lean back in your chair with a group of people that are different than you around a table, and you're not impressing anybody. You just are, right? We are so obsessed with what's next. What's like how many times have y'all two been asked, like, are y'all going to move to a bigger church, into a new church, or when's the raise coming, or are you guys going to do this? Y'all going to get a master's degree? When are you going to get your doctorate degree? And what's how many kids? You're going to have 2 kids? When's your next kid? Everything's about what's after. Yeah. We have no sense of, I'm good. Now, I'm good doesn't not mean I don't want to be a leader someday. It doesn't mean I don't want to make $1 million someday, but it's an ethos of when I put my head down on my pillow, I just go to sleep, man, because I'm not worried about what tomorrow's going to be, because I'm grounded in these moments. And so we don't have, I mean, Dave Ramsey has built an entire career off. Dude, just chill out and put some money in the bank. And then when you get fired, it's annoying. You're not going to starve, right? That's right. Or when your wife gets cancer, you can take a year off of work and be with her in her last moments, because, right? That's peace, man. It's not that bad things aren't going to happen to you. It's that you've got this foundation of people. You got this foundation of whew. So for me, honestly, where peace, I really found it sitting next to people doing crisis stuff. I had anxiety bad for several years, man. And that was just my body overload. There is a point when that alarm breaks and it's just like the switch doesn't work anymore. And it's just ringing all the time. And man, sitting next to people whose child was dead in the next room, or their husband was dead in the next room, or their wife was dead in the next room. And they look at you in the eye and they say, what do I do now? And there is no answer to that question. There's nothing you can say to fix that, or to be like, well, what you should do, right? You just have a presence there. And there was something about my intellect doesn't help me. I've got 2 PhDs. That doesn't help you in those moments, right? How many grad school classes, how many, arguments I'd won, none of that matters. The only thing that matters is I'm here and I'm just going to sit here with you. Yeah. And suddenly the old stories of Jesus at the well, he didn't go there and start lecturing her about her behavior. He broke social convention. He showed up in a place he was told you're not supposed to be. And then he said, hey, here's something for you. Here's a water. And then it was, hey, I see you. I need you to know that I see you. And then it was, hey, you're better than that. Right? In that order. And we get that out of whack, right? So peace for me, honestly, was sitting in with person after person after person after person, where there's nothing to say, there's nothing to be. And suddenly just my presence had value. And then suddenly I start showing up with my kids. I quit trying to lecture them every time I see them. Or my wife, when she comes and says, hey, I'm struggling. It's not my response as a husband was like, well, if you just told your butt, just shut up, Delony, and just sit here, right? And just say, that really stinks, and I hate that for you. Let's just sit here. And then she would, my wife's brilliant, smart. She didn't need my advice. She needed my presence, right? And it was just this whole orientation towards peace, right? And then I started sleeping better, and I stopped fighting everything and trying to be right all the time. And instead of being right, started being with, right?
Yeah, that's good.
That's so good.
That's so powerful. Peter Stanky and, Murray Bowen and, these big names in psychology. That's kind of this running theme throughout some of their work, is that non-anxious presence that's able to be there, and how powerful it is to be someone that's not adding anxiety into the emotional system, and also being able to redistribute anxiety to where it's supposed to be within the system.
The guy who trained me in the crisis response, y'all probably know Dr. Andy Young, but one of his common refrains was, calm is contagious. If I show up to a scene where somebody's about to commit suicide, or somebody's about to be in a tough situation, or something bad has just happened, and I bring this to it, I make everything worse, right?
Yeah.
And so I've got to bring a smile or a heavy presence, a solid foundation presence, which just changes the whole energy of every situation you run into.
Yeah. So I think a lot of times we might know that entering the extreme crisis situations, but we don't do it so good sometimes in the everyday crisis situation, or the everyday slog. Yeah.
Can I tell you a magic moment for me?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Was this, and you're right. When you're going into a house and you know that someone has passed away and their loved one's there, yeah, man, your body gets amped up and you get all the right adrenaline and corticoid chemicals. You're ready to party, right? No, that sounded bad. You're ready to fight. You're ready to not party. That's bad insider lingo. You're ready to go do a good job and serve people.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's harder when it's a Tuesday afternoon and your kids are yelling and your wife is frustrated with you, right?
Yeah.
So this one magic movement from judgment to curiosity has changed so much about my life and my marriage and my relationship with my kids, my relationship with my friends. Instead of entering a situation looking for what is right about this, what is wrong, what are you doing that you could be doing, in counseling, you never ask the question, why did you do that? That's a judgment question. You always ask, hey, tell me about that. Tell me about what was it about this other person that made you consider leaving your family for them, right? Tell me about that. Not, why did you do that, right? So it's moving from judgment to curiosity. So getting home, instead of being, hey, kids, why are y'all yelling? It's, hey, tell me about what's so exciting in here, man. And that changes everything. When my wife says, hey, why didn't you do the dishes while I was gone? Versus, hey, tell me about what must have been so busy on a Saturday. Like you weren't even able to help at all. And then I can say, because I was being completely lazy and I'm sorry. Or I could say, hey, I was dealing with a situation. And does that make sense? It's just changing our orientation from judging it to being curious about it.
That's good.
That's perfect.
That's great advice, actually.
All right. So, through this, what are some of the things that anxiety causes in us that put up blockers? So like something that I notice is on the internet, man. The internet's such a bad place to communicate, because I feel like everybody's anxious, right? And everybody's living out of that. It's almost like they're not using the right part of their brain to communicate right now. What are some of the ways that you see anxiety trapping people, and what are some ways that we can try to avoid those traps?
So when your fight or flight kicks in, when your amygdala sends the signals, amygdala among other parts of your brain, that it's going down, I see a bear. It literally, your brain takes your frontal lobe, the part of your thinking brain, your rational brain, it takes it offline. It literally unplugs it, because think 10,000 years ago, and you may have heard this analogy, if you wake up in your cave and there's a bear in the front of that cave, your brain doesn't want you going through, I wonder if that's a nice bear. I wonder if that's one of those hugging bears. I wonder if that bear is just looking for acorns and not for people. It just wants you to run, right? Just run. So it actually takes off the question asking part of your brain and says, go. And it does a subtle shift from close enough to fact, right? That's how a kid holding a cell phone or a toy gun gets shot in a big city.
Yeah.
Because when that moment is engaged, that person's brain may shift to close enough, right? I'm not going to do any checking it out. I'm going to respond, right? And so one of the things we used to do this, it was a movement we would do this in when I was with my crisis partner, just moving my finger from the back of my head to the front of my head. And we would do things with someone who was experiencing crisis, right? Their child just took their own life. Someone just passed away. And we would try to get them into, you're safe right now. Or you just experienced a shooting and it wasn't safe. Your body went to fight or flight. You're okay now. And some simple things are counting ceiling tiles, counting floor tiles, going outside and taking deep breaths. I'm in a safe place right now. I'm going to listen to the air conditioner. So there's something about bringing, I hate to use computer metaphors because they aren't very good, but there's something about bringing your brain back online, your frontal lobe. I wasn't safe. I'm safe now, right? And some of that is in our relationships. Like, man, if you've had a girlfriend that treated you really ugly, or if you had a first wife who was super abusive, you sometimes have to go through a process and say, my current wife's not her, right? I've got to bring myself to right now. I'm safe now, right? You're not my mom yelling mean things to me when I was a kid. You're not my dad who was abusive to me. You're my husband. I love you. You're safe. Now we're here. So you have to give yourself some space, and the more you practice it, you get quicker and quicker and quicker at it. Yeah. And in fact, now if you're a good long-term crisis person, you end up having it in reverse. When things get bananas, you get real calm and clear. And then when you get home, your brain's like, what was that? Right? Can we just, then it processes it in the right order. But those are some quick tips on just how to stop and pause.
That's good.
Man, yeah, we need that. We need that in the age of information bias and these ways that we are constantly, we see what we want to see. We don't look for facts anymore. Everything's emotionalized, and to get out of that headspace, to calm down, to breathe, and to process things properly.
And then ask yourself, why are you speaking?
Yeah.
Are you speaking to be heard, or are you speaking so you can tell people you said something? Mm-hmm. The problem with social media is it's a signal, right? I can put out to the world, look what I said. That doesn't help, right? When people are frustrated with something I say on my show and they comment down in the chat section, that's not helpful. Some of them will email me directly and say, hey, will you clarify that? Because I didn't quite hear what you said. That's super helpful, man. And I love to engage folks there because they actually want to know so we can grow and learn. They're not just trying to fight. Remember in middle school, right? There was somebody who would catch you by yourself behind the school. We're fighting. No one's going to watch. This is for me, right? That's different than the middle school kid who shoves the other kid in a crowded room knowing a teacher's going to come break it up just so people think he's tough. Mm-hmm. Those are two different things, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. So, John, on
it's
this
probably
podcast,
a terrible analogy for y'all's show. Sorry, guys.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
That's good.
So on the show, we love to give quick practical steps. So, if you're going to tell someone, a faithful Christian who's listening to this, a person who's trying to wrestle through some of these things, if you could give them something to do for 5 minutes today, just say, hey, do this for 5. If you're dealing with anxiety, if you're wrestling through stress and processing it improperly, like this is what you can do for 5 minutes to put you on a better path for at least for today.
Yeah.
What would it be? So what would be a quick practical step to give people?
A quick practical step would be identify that alarm as it's coming online, right? Identify what it is. Ask yourself, what's happening here that's setting this alarm off? And I talk about this in the book. The only true cure on planet Earth for anxiety is other people, and have somebody that you can call. And we're in the hotline era, right? Because we don't have friends anymore. I think the last stat I read was 3 out of 4 Americans, if in a time of crisis, have 0 people to call. And so we actually have had industries pop up like hotlines. And I can't tell how many people call on my show and they ask me this hard question. And I just say, why are you calling me, man? I'm just a dude on the radio. Yeah. And they'll tell you, I got nobody, right? So stop and hear the alarms, listen to them, and then ask yourself, what are they trying to tell you? Are you not safe? Are you disconnected? And then, man, reach out and call a person. And if you don't have somebody to call in seasons when you don't have anxiety, do the hard work of cultivating those things. Keep showing up, find people, develop friendships, develop connections, because that's your emergency fund for life, man. Things are going to come up. You got to have people in your circle that you can call.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's good.
That's good.
All right. So you got your quick practical step, guys. Go out there and, you've got a telephone line to your ear. You've got, a can on your face, and it's saying, hey, anxiety's here. Grab the line and start walking with it. Go find out where that sound's coming from. There's a fire in the house. Follow the smoke to find the fire and put it out. That's your 5 minutes today. Your quick practical step.
That's right.
Man, that's awesome. John, thank you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us and sharing your time with us today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
You guys are awesome, man. I appreciate y'all putting kindness and goodness out in the world and helping people think through challenges, man. That's awesome.
Thank you for joining us today on Gathering Manna. We hope you gathered something of real use, some tools from John's talk. We also wanted to point you to a few places. Obviously, if you're looking to research a little bit more on anxiety, go ahead and pick up John's book, Redefining Anxiety.
It's
I think
so short.
Yeah.
It took me like 45 minutes to read the whole thing.
Done.
And it was a great experience, and I learned a lot about myself and anxiety through it all. Yeah,
right.
It's good.
And I think it's just such a good topic to really explore during this day and age. Also, John, of course, he has his podcast, the Dr. John Delony Show. It's through Dave Ramsey's Solutions. He's one of Dave Ramsey's personalities. And so check him out. He's constantly uploading podcasts, I think almost daily. And so there's plenty of content where he's helping other people out. Great resource for you there as well.
Yeah. So this has been Gathering Manna. And remember, get outside your tent today.
This has been Gathering Manna. For more content like today's episode, like us on Facebook or follow us on Instagram or subscribe to our YouTube channel. For content on the go, subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcasting platform. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or drop a comment on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. Thanks for joining us. God bless you, and we hope that you'll be mobilized to get outside of your tent today.